take you to the Western Cape, where DStv and the University of Cape Town are rewriting history with the Stories from the Ashes initiative. It's an initiative that's turning the ashes and remnants of literature lost in the 2021 fire into a book. The April 2021 fires in Cape Town destroyed UCT's Ujala Library, which housed the greatest collection of African stories. For more on this, we are joined by UCT's Libraries Executive Director, Ujala Satgoor. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Tell us what's happened since that fateful fire back in April 2021.
Good evening, Rofhiwa, and good evening to your viewers as well. And thank you very much for having me on your show. As we recounted severally, 18th April 2021 is an indelible memory for all of us associated with the Ujala Library, whether you're a member of the UCT community, whether you're part of the Western Cape, the country, and the world of libraries. The Ujala Library was home to a very unique African collection, African studies collection, a unique African films collection, government publications representing 26 African countries, and a varied manuscript primary collection. However, not all our collections were housed in the Ujala Library and the Ujala basements, the Ujala Reading Room and the Ujala basements. We have them dotted also in two other off-site storage spaces. But our most important collections were in the Ujala Library. So in these last 2 years, we've had to normalize recovery in this past year, particularly after our salvage efforts in the first year. And it's not an easy step to take and a decision to make where you are normalizing recovery from a very, very serious loss. And so we've been able to actually now reconcile all our missing materials, all our lost materials. We've started doing individual audits of collections to ensure that the manuscript collections are intact, and we're now able to know what has been affected. Thankfully, the majority of those collections are intact. In terms of the monograph, that is the book collections across the various knowledge domains, we know exactly what has been completely lost in the fire and what we've been able to salvage. And those books now that were salvaged from the basements have almost 90% of those materials have now been declared shelf ready. This means that every book has been cleaned, has been declared free of mold and any soot, and has a little addendum to the bibliographic record stating survived the 2021 fire and has been reshelved, and which is now available for use by researchers by appointment. I'm repeating myself here when I say the last year has been a significant year of recovery. Small successes, Rofhiwa, but we still have a mountain of work ahead of us. This is a multi-year recovery project, and it is going to take multi-millions also for us to be able to put back this amazing library together.
And we were just showing our viewers some of those visuals from that day in April in 2021, and you can tell from the damage that the work indeed is a lot that you have to do. So with that, tell us about the partnership with DStv, the expertise that they bring on board to create this project that you've launched.
I think I would describe the relationship and this particular creative journey embarked upon with DStv, Ogilvy's, and UCT Libraries Special Collections was a strange amalgam of creatives and librarians and archivists. And the idea behind it was to see what could be done from the ash and the remnants and salvaged materials. The initial idea was to create several notebooks with bespoke pens designed and crafted from ash and remnants, and the ink, which was then formulated from ash particularly. And these were to be distributed to leading writers, poets, and thought leaders of the continent who would pen their reflections, new stories, new poetry, etc., that could form the kernel of a new collection to be housed in the rebuilt Jagger Library. Unfortunately, that didn't come to pass, but a more significant and symbolic project emanated out of this, where we had remnants put together, salvaged text as well, put together into 8 chapters, covering a spectrum of knowledge and information, starting off with histories, climate, the environment and climate, gender studies, youth, the arts, etc. And so you have little snippets and vignettes of text taken from the last 100 years, the last century, etc., to see. And it gives you a glimpse into how things have changed as well in the Southern African region. And so we now have a fairly hefty book that it's one of its kind. It's a unique book that's going to hold a very special place in this library. It's printed printed from ink that has been formulated, as I said earlier on, from the ash. And you see the texture of the book is extremely unique. And for us, as the staff of UCT Libraries, it is of special symbolic significance in the sense that from the ashes, that is literally made up of burnt materials, the wood from the libraries, etc., has now been embedded within this book. Secondly, it's symbolic of the tenacity, the hard work of those professionals who over the years, since the 1950s, collected these items, built these collections and curated those collections. But it's also a symbol of hope for us going forward, that from the ashes we can have something new beginning. Fire may destroy, but it also gives birth to new life. And we're seeing this as a wonderful beacon. So the combined creativity of DStv and Ogilvy's, and the text and the intellectual content and the knowledge of the collections melded amazingly well. And these are the kinds of partnerships that we would like to see going forward. What we have in place is a whole new literary art piece, which gives young people, artistic students of the arts, rather, the opportunity to say, how can I embrace research and present content differently? But it's also saying that we need to write new stories. We need to embrace new voices. We need to be more inclusive of those voices that didn't belong in special collections and archives before. So, Rofhiwa, it's also creating a whole new debate around what are significant archives on the continent, in South Africa, etc. And I think we are in a wonderful place to be able to leverage what happened after the fire, through the fire, after the fire, and where do we want to go forward and go ahead with this. So this opportunity with DStv as well allows us to expand the footprint in terms of rebuilding our collections throughout the continent. For example, our African film collection, which chronicled the development of African cinematography from various countries on the continent. We now need to start rebuilding that collection from those very same countries. The second is the government publications collection, which represented government publications of 26 African countries. That was a very painstaking task in building that collection. So we are looking forward to creating those networks and introductions via the DStv footprint. So it's partnerships and collaborations such as these that we're looking forward to.
Ujala, and also as we move forward and we find new storytellers and we start to tell new stories, it's also important to recognize the historical references that exist within the African context. Why is it important that we preserve the African literature and the history that lies within it as well?
That's a very important question that you've asked, Rofhiwa, and an issue that is very critical for us here on the continent. As librarians and libraries that host special collections, we need to start building our own Africana collections. We need to become those custodians of African voices. We are always in awe of collections held by Ivy League universities abroad. And yet, when we look at our own collections, who is collecting, who is curating, who is preserving African voices for posterity? I can understand the concern of many writers and thought leaders in terms of what is the infrastructure in place to be able to ensure that their papers, their diaries, their collections are maintained and preserved appropriately. So that gives rise also to the question of what is the infrastructure in place for us to be able to suitably preserve African memory, African content. And I think this is the challenge as to why many of our collections, many of our authors, many of our political leaders and philosophers, etc., their personal papers get taken away from the continent. And we're saying we need to reclaim that. Aside from a retrospective collecting mandate, we need to be proactive for the future as well. We need to be able to say these libraries, and we from UCT, we're very committed to the idea of rebuilding this collection for the continent and making sure that it is of and by the continent. And so our commitment is very clear that this has to be reflective of the African voices. The rebuilt Jagger Library is going to be the African library, a desired place for African memory, identity, and creative expression.
Thank you very much for those insights, Ujala Satgoor from the University of Cape Town, talking to us about that initiative between the university and DStv in rebuilding the Jagger Library, and of course the history that it contains, and of course the new book which has been developed from those ashes.